Do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a proven roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. We walk you through the exact same process that we use to run franchise marketing campaigns for our clients at scale that has resulted in triple-digit growth. This blueprint isn't for anyone. It's not for people just starting a franchise. It's not for franchises without long-term goals. This is for franchises that want to scale up their marketing in a predictable and profitable way using a proven roadmap. If you want to sell more franchises, keep your current franchisees happy, and learn from people who have already done it, go to franchisegrowthblueprint.com and sign up today. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Franchise Marketing Podcast. Today, very excited for our guest. It is Jason McReynolds. Jason, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on. So you're the founder of Fran Metrics. For those of our listeners who haven't heard of you or your company, just mind giving a brief introduction into what you do and who you are?
Yeah, for sure. I started out as part of a franchising organization where I was kind of in charge of, supporting the franchisees, but also helping them out if they were struggling. And we tried to get into some systems out there to help us collect some data and share data and support the franchisees and kind of have a way to benchmark all the results of all the things that were important to us. And we did not find a real good system. And the ones that were out there didn't really engage with the franchisees or had other issues. And so I set out to develop something, and that's why we started Fran Metrics. So our purpose is basically to have kind of an automated system and a more technologically advanced system in order to help, identify issues within a franchise quickly instead of it being a lagging indicator, find out what's going on within that without waiting for a visitor, without waiting for a franchisee to say, hey, I got a problem or I'm not making money, 6 months down the road. And then, oh, we better go deal with it now. Because now might be too late. And so, the old way of doing it and the really antiquated way of doing it was the way we did it before, and the way most franchise organizations did it before was they would require like the franchisees to send in a profit and loss statement, for example, and they would send them by email or a spreadsheet, and which is a really ridiculous way to do things nowadays. But in the past, that was just the way it was. That's just, you only had the certain options out there to do things like you are able to now is just so easy. Like everything could be instant. So we've been able to go out and connect with POS systems or with CRMs, and then also with like a cloud-based bookkeeping system like QuickBooks Online, and bring all that data together and actually give really powerful information about what's going on in each unit.
That's really cool. And I'm sure from a franchisor level, they're able to really find some deep and interesting insights that also like help dictate and flag almost like this stickiness and retention of franchisees. I'd love to, I guess, like hear a bit more about what are some of the interesting ways that franchisors are using this data.
Well, so franchisors can use this data in many ways. One I'd already kind of alluded to is the support of franchisees and flagging, like you said, any kind of metric that's off. And again, it could be like a computation of multiple data points coming in. Like for a gym they care about how many, how many trial memberships turn into regular membership, or the revenue per membership, or things like that. So one's a financial, one's based on members, and do the math. But the point being is if something's really important to you, if it's kind of your core focus, you have some data point to do that, and then flag like these lower performing units and say, you're not really holding up to what our focus is, what we're trying to do for our customers, what's the most important thing to us. And it could be customer feedback. It could be like, we want the best customer satisfaction rating. So finding out who's not doing that. But another thing that the franchisors get, and actually the thing that I've been able to get more interest off of, is the consolidated data for item 19 of the disclosure document. Because again, back in the day, I would say about 40% was the number of franchisors who actually had a solid item 19 for the the earning projections or the financial performance indicators. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But that data itself is now in about 70%. And so franchisors that go out there without a solid item 19 are at a real disadvantage.
That's
super and I meant
cool.
to say financial performance representation, so that word just kind of skipped my mind for a second. Anyway, go ahead.
No worries. It's almost the weekend. I totally get that, man.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So, for franchisors that are just starting out and want to like build this system and this dashboard, I guess like the first step would be to identify which metrics they should track. So what are your recommendations on what metrics and KPIs are important to them?
Well, that is very, very industry specific for sure. So like a restaurant, for example, you're looking at service speed times, because, it's just known the quicker you are in a restaurant business, especially delivery, the quicker you are. Domino's did a survey back 20 years ago. They figured out when they lowered their delivery time, they were able to get twice as many orders from that customer, and the ones that they were late on stopped ordering. So again, it's really what you're known for, and Domino's was known for quick delivery back in the day anyway. And not that they're not now, but that's kind of what separated them when they started. And so if I was a Domino's, I'd say service speed is what we're known for, what we got to be. So that's the number one, prioritize them. But in any restaurant business, labor costs are going to be important. Cost of goods sold or food cost is going to be important. The thing I recommend when we go into each organization, we'll identify specific KPIs or metrics that we want to analyze. But the more important thing is that you don't get too many, and that you get the right ones for what you want to do. Because if you're looking at too much, it gets lost in the importance of which ones are right. That's why I'm not a big fan of profit and loss statements or a laundry list of every single expense you have. And do you really need to know how much you pay in rent every month when you've been paying it every month for 5 years? It's just taking up all that room. I say, listen, keep it to 20 metrics or less, because if your franchisees are just looking at a long list of things, it's like, what's important to you, right? So it's important to prioritize. More importantly, but they do change. There's all kinds of different metrics based on what you are. The gym will have a different one than a restaurant. Will have different than like a home service one. They're all unique. There's a couple common threads like customer service and revenue and operating profit, like the basic financial ones. But the ones that deal with the operations, those are going to be unique to each organization.
That totally makes sense. So do you see these metrics changing over time as a system grows from, say, an emerging brand to already an established one or enterprise level franchise?
Yeah, yes, they definitely change. And it's almost like a different focus more than anything, not necessarily a change in, what necessarily should or shouldn't be important to an organization. But a franchisor will come back and find issues and say, we need to start tracking this. It's more of like an internal audit or examination of what they want to be or what kind of issues they're having. Like if a location was dirty, they would say, okay, we're getting feedback all the time that the bathrooms are dirty or something. I don't know that specifically would end up on a KPI report, but it's an example of something that maybe we put a little bit more focus on it, or we or we build that into a score that they can see. So if that score is coming down, they'll know, and then they can find why it's coming down. One of the big important scores is going to be like the evaluation score or the field audits when they come to visit the locations. And so you can change the numbers within that scorecard. That's typically what more advanced franchisors do. They'll say one thing is more important than the other, and they'll make that adjustment, and it'll show up in that way in the numbers itself.
Interesting. So I want to hear more about how, the more advanced franchisors create weighted factors. Can you expand on that a little? We'll get right back to the show, but do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. To find out more, visit franchisegrowthblueprint.com. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Now back to today's episode.
In the normal field visit, if somebody's coming to visit a franchisee, typically a new one will walk in with a clipboard, and it'll be 40 questions about stuff they thought of when they were building it out, walking there. An advanced franchisor will have about 300 questions, up to 400 questions, and will take 3 or 4 hours because they're looking at everything. They're listening to how their customers talk on the phone, and they will identify what's important. So they will even, like the pizza franchise I work with, they'll take a picture of a pizza and they will examine how spread out the toppings are, if there's a sauce ring, if there's this, and they will actually apply a score to each item of how the pizza is supposed to look. So that's how in depth these can go. And they will weight things like health violations for something in a restaurant are huge, right? So if somebody's didn't wash their hands, that's going to cost them 20 points compared to the store was unlocked on time, or there was a window wasn't clean or something like that. Everything's important, but definitely somebody not washing their hands before they go back and make food is huge, right? That's going to make somebody sick. They could end up in the paper. So, and some could be auto fail. Like if you're selling non-approved products in your franchise, for example, it's just auto fail. And some franchise will penalize franchisees for doing that because obviously that's a big no-no in franchising. So, that's kind of some examples that I've seen where that happens, but it is important to weight those. That's when I have talk with new franchisors, I'm just set a priority because, I read the book. If anybody's read the book Traction, which is an awesome, amazing book. One of the things that really stuck with me is that if everything's important, nothing's important. Basically, that's kind of how I stick to this. That's why I work on the focuses and what you want to be known for. And then also, make your operations and your evaluations and your KPIs that we work with, make them a reflection of what your focuses are and what your values are. So it does come from the top down.
Totally. I love it. I love how in-depth you went with that. So switching gears a little and going a bit higher level, I know you mentioned one before about tracking too many metrics, but what are some other pitfalls that you see franchisors having when trying to track performance across their entire system?
There's a couple. And first of all, so in just the the tracking itself, honestly, the biggest thing I find is they don't engage with their franchisees a lot of time. They won't use the data to what it's used for, or they don't understand that it's important in the first place. Because historically the data hasn't been there and it hasn't been easy to access. It's just been something that they haven't had, which, is something that new brands have over old brands, right? Because these pre-existing companies, it's impossible to get buy-ins. I've had franchisors come to me with 300, 400 units saying, hey, I want to do this. Had 9 meetings, met with the board, everything. But guess what? zero buy-in from the franchisees, and they have to pick their battles. And they've been doing it a certain way for 30 years. They don't care. They're not gonna buy into this system anymore. So yeah, these established brands have been around forever. They have some name recognition, but they don't have the tools that you can build into, which all starts with the franchise agreement, the disclosure document, and setting things up from the beginning. If you have a franchisee doing something from the gate, they're not going to care. That's how it's always been. That's how they've been doing it since day one. It was in the FDD. It was in the franchise agreement. It's not old switcheroo that they get defensive about. But the franchisors that set it up and do it from the beginning, they're pretty good at it. But we help them with that. But it's either they don't recognize the value, they don't know that the opportunity is there to do this, or they can't get buy-in from the franchisees. One of those three things. I mean, once the data is there and they use it, it's pretty much, it works well. I've been copied on emails from the franchisor to the franchisee where they'll show one of the reports we have is like a descending KPI report. So it'll list the KPI, like customer satisfaction, and we'll list every franchise in order from highest to lowest. So all they have to do is go to the lowest and send the email to the franchisee, the lowest one, and say, hey, out of all the franchisees, this is the score you need, that you're the lowest on. Let's figure out what we can do to make that better in a positive way. Like, you don't want to be adversarial unless it's a complete violation or they're doing something wrong. But at the same time, it's something you need to work on. And it's done in a flash where they can see an issue. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. And I was looking at your website. I was watching that walkthrough video that you have. And one thing that really stood out to me was how you kind of almost share system data and KPIs with individual franchisees. So I'd love to hear, have you seen that, have a positive impact and kind of like motivate these lower performing franchisees to kind of step it up as well, almost like that, giving them that competitive spirit?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, one of the ideas to do this is to create competitiveness. And sometimes that'll happen on the top end too, not just the low scores, like they want to be first or they want to be in the top 5% of a performing store. And yes, and I will have to say, it takes, not all franchisees are same. Some are more engaged than others. We track when they log in, and some it's like, you'd have to go hold a gun to their head to get them to log into anything, because they just don't do that. They go to work and they should be. And we automate, we send emails with reports, and we do a lot of steps to try to get them to engage. Then others are proactive on there all the time, and they do care. And so there's not a single answer, but yes, it can. And yes, it will also, the franchisor has also got to do this, to engage. We can only do so much. We can automate emails, we can send out reports, we can communicate with franchisees a little bit as a vendor, but the franchisor should be, hey, the Fran Metrics reports are out, please give them a look, and actually remind them, hey, this is the way that you can, figure out where you can improve. Because, the franchisor goes and visits a franchisee typically 3 or 4 times a year in person. Well, what are you going to do between that, right? Like, this is something you can evaluate. And it's based on all the reporting units. So you're not comparing yourself to some arbitrary number that the franchisor pulled out a hat. We're taking all the metrics and either averaging them or making a median. And so this is a real benchmark on real data within your organization. So it's you can't argue with the numbers. You can only work on them or not, or choose to be better or not. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Very, very true. Very true. Cool. So I know on the marketing side, there is this constant battle of looking at vanity metrics, which are kind of nice to look at and don't mean anything, and right, like real actionable metrics where you can actually take action on. So I'm curious from your perspective, how have you been tackling that and educating and empowering franchisors on that level?
Well, when I go out there, I like there's two things that have to matter for any metric we put in there. And number one is that it's important to the system and what your goals are, and number two, it's actionable. You can't change it. It's out. Like I already talked about rent. I mean, but there's anything that's beyond, like I phrase it like this, like if I'm a multi-unit franchisee and I wanted to build a bonus system to motivate my general managers to do better, this would be it. This would be the scorecard, because everything on there is actionable and the result of how you're operating. It's meant to be a system to improve things, not to brag, not to show data that's not that important. It's something to put your ideal operations, but and even your values in place. Like I said, it could be your customer feedback score. If you say, "Hey, I want our customers to be blown away when they walk in the door," there's got to be some number you have to be able to place on that, and that's very important. And you can, in our system, you can see if there is if the trends of these metrics align with each other, if there's some cause and effect. We can't tell you what's cause, which number is the cause and what's the effect, but you can see if they correspond to each other. And you can then go back and say, hey, when we find out when franchisees have this rating on their customer service or this rating on this, their profitability is higher, their revenue is higher. So this is a real thing that we've actually shown, and you can actually put the actual numbers into that statement. You're not just doing arbitrary, a statement has a lot more oomph behind it if it says, when you can actually put numbers instead of just some generic kind of feel good thing, like some meme you see on LinkedIn or something like that. It's, if you can say, hey, you can raise your profit by $2,000 if you do this. In fact, our break-even analysis will actually allow franchisees and the franchisor or whoever in the unit to just click on something to see if like a what-if scenario, like what if you had like the mean level of food cost or labor cost compared to the whole system, what would that look like? So like the email I was talking about where the franchisor sent the email to the franchisee, they said, hey, you would have made $5,000 more last month just by having the average, not by being the best or, setting records, just by having the average of what everybody else is doing. So nice. maybe make some adjustments somewhere, figure something out. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So Jason, one question I always like to ask is, what advice would you give someone just starting out as a franchisor?
As a franchisor, my biggest advice for franchisors, and I've been part of a franchisor, is get the right people in, especially for new franchisors. Just because somebody has a check and a pulse does not mean they're going to make a good franchisee. I always say there's the 80-20 rule, but dealing with bad franchisees is like a 90-10 rule. You're going to be spending 90% of your time with the worst 10% of your franchisees. And you're not going to be able to grow with bad franchisees. If you kick them out, you're going to have to disclose that you lost a franchise location. Don't do it. Don't take the money. That's all I can say is don't take it. Do your due diligence. Make sure they fit in with your culture and your values. Make sure that you align with them so you can get them on board with what you want to do, and make sure, it's all about getting the right people and building the right relationships. So awesome. That's my one biggest advice that I've seen franchisors make, and they regret it. And they're still talking about it 8 years later. Like, man, why did we sign that agreement with these guys? They're killing me.
I love the advice. I love it. So Jason, we are ending, getting near the end of the episode. So sure. I always like to end it with something that I call the lightning round. Don't worry. Oh. It's just a few fast-paced questions. No hardballs, okay. I promise. You ready?
Oh, gosh. Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. First question is, what is your favorite tool or app that you cannot live without?
Or the one I can't live without, probably Slack.
Slack. Great.
I know that's nerdy, but yeah, I'm on it all the time. Yeah.
All right. Next question is, what is your favorite book?
Probably E-Myth. or Traction. One of those two. Probably E-Myth.
Very cool.
The E-Myth.
Cool. Next question is, who is a franchise leader that you look up to?
Oh, man, that's a good one. It's a lightning round. Charles Bonifilo from Tint World. He's pretty cool. I like him a lot. I talk to him a lot. Yeah.
Very cool.
I probably butchered his last name, but whatever. Call him Charles, so it's not my fault.
All right, Jason, last question, I promise. Where can people find out more about you and Fran Metrics?
Yeah, so our website's franmetrics.net. So if somebody wants a demo or something, just go on there and book it and show you around. Or yeah, that's probably the easiest place, right online, franmetrics.net. Easy.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You shared a ton of information that I know our audience is going to love. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And until then, happy marketing.